Hey guys, welcome to the Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. So today we're going to be talking about fish locomotion. And we're going to start by looking at fry because they are the ultimate fast start swimmers, which when we're speaking in terms of science of locomotion of fish, fast start means from a dead standstill, how quickly can they move? And I want you to pay close attention to even this fish. What's its tail doing? Is it straight or is it bent? And what are its other fins doing? Because we're going to go over all of this in just a little bit. But this is an adult fish, and I noticed something that I had never noticed before about juvenile fish, about fry. And the reason I noticed it was because in this tank here we have least killifish, and we also have some pygmy sunfish or Elosoma gilberti, and they do something very interesting, and it concerned me at first. But when we look at these fish, what's different about their posture? Can you see how their tail is kinked? And how much of their body, these ones are about a month old now, how much of their body actually is tail, for that matter, compared to the adults? And with young fry, why is it that they're shaped like they are, and why are adult fish shaped the way they are? So that's what we're going to go over. And this special thing that I want to show you is really cool in that these fish are loaded like a spring. So right now, they're fairly relaxed, they're getting used to the light, but as I shine light on some younger ones over here, their tail stays crooked to one side. And each fish has a dominant side, but when you come behind it, if you were to watch that in super slow-mo, they have the ability to either swim by undulating, going back and forth like a normal fish in an S wave, or when they kink their body to one side, they can actually jet off like a loaded spring. See that versus this? They kink off to one side. So we're going to slow that down and we're going to look at some animation from a university. But the fact that these least killifish were kinked up like that really made me think about, did they have a spine problem? What was going on? But it's fry in general that I just generally don't get to see from above. But you see, as they get more tense, as this pen gets nearer, that kink gets more severe in some of the fish. And when we come up behind it, like a predator, all it takes is that kink, you saw it really well there, to undo once, and that happens. Now, if they whip it back to the other side and flex those muscles, then it actually propels them again. So it's not that important where they're headed, but just that they're headed out of the way. And when we look at the adult fish, they swim quite differently. So we'll also take a look at some adult fish in the water here. And if we look at them, you'll see that when they get startled, they do have a fast start motion, but that they generally stick with the adult plan rather than the small fry plan. You see how its body's straight, but we come up behind it and boom, it swims off with the S-shaped patterns, or they turn or they move that way. They aren't spring-loaded, so to speak. And so I just wanted to kind of point this out, and something you should watch in your fish. Now, the other thing that I want to show you about fish that we're going to talk about when we look at the animation in a minute here is how tall is the fish versus how slender they are. How aerodynamic, or hydrodynamic in this case, is the fish. So, and what does that mean about how much power that fish has when it is in its spring-loaded state? So here we have some little rainbow fish, and I come up behind it yet again, and it's not going to veer off course. It can just scoot along a little quicker than I'm coming up behind it and not worry. But the young ones, they don't really have that ability. They basically have to kink up and fling forward. So let's look at a couple things about that, and then also we're going to look at, for instance, a bass, why it's so strong in the way it swims, or a bluefin tuna, the fastest swimming fish in the world, going something like 45 to 60 miles per hour, depending on who you ask. Something like 45 knots in the water is their top speed, and why they've got such a large body. If you look at it from this side, it's got kind of an oval shape, and why various fish, not all, but many, follow these patterns. So that's what we're going to look at today, and it's just a little curiosity that it turns out there's a lot of science behind. So let's take a look at some animations that people far smarter than me, including David Resnick, over at the University of UC Riverside, put together, as well as UBC up in Canada, up in Vancouver. We're going to go ahead and look at that animation in a moment of fish locomotion, as well as the University of Chicago. But yet again, you can see the adult down there. In these little top-dwelling killifish, even the adults keep that spring-loaded tail state. And it's something that I didn't notice until I looked at them carefully, specifically at night when they can't see really coming. You blind them with the flashlight. They've got that kink in their tail, and they'll just scoot forward, the adults, and they can change the axis that they're on. So if there was a strike at them from another fish, they'd be out of the way. But as far as the distance moved, it's nothing compared to where the fry can move several distances. And there's actually a law of motion in physics and hydrodynamics that we're going to talk about in just a minute. So this is the first half. Now let's get to the other half that was done by people far smarter than me that will be cited in the sources, and we'll have some commentary as well as look at a little drawing I did also. Alright, so first of all, fish locomotion. Something to know about it is that most fish, when we look at them from above, they're shaped like this, which we saw earlier, and they're actually shaped kind of like this shape here from a profile too, generally being slender, and we'll talk about why that is. But in a fish, the propulsion comes 90% from their tail in most species. Now there's exceptions like sole or flounder or eels and things like that, where they kind of use their whole body, and I'm going to show you a quick animation that goes over that. But in the bony fish family, 50 to 60% of their propulsion is from their tail, and their tail and their muscle in their body, most of it is tail muscle, and the tail starts right where the anus is and goes all the way down, or the end of the anal fin, and it goes all the way down to the end of the caudal fin, or the tail fin. And in some fish, that can be from like here all the way back to here. In others, it's from here to here. But that distance really determines how quickly they move. And the way they move is by flexing muscles called myotomes, and they're little muscle bands that come out from the center of the vertebrae and the spine, and basically they can flex like little sets of rubber bands, like these dotted lines, and they can flex this way and on either side in sequence. So these will flex tight, and that will curl the fish into a N shape if we're looking at it here. Then if it tightens the ones on this side, that would curl the fish into a U shape. And then it's up to the tail to be the main thrust. It pushes off the tail as well as the caudal peduncle, which is essentially tail before the fin. The caudal peduncle is the back part of the fish that's all muscle and tail. And I have an animation in a moment here that will go over the pressure forces on each area and the turbulence there. So, just for comparison, 80% of a fish is muscle by weight, and in humans, 30% or so of us is muscle by weight. So, they put a lot of resources into that. And other than these muscles and the way they locomote, scales are important, as well as armor, and the way it overlaps, giving it more hydrodynamic or aerodynamic flow. It causes more turbulence behind the fish, which pushes it forward. It slips it through the water by creating low pressure in the front where the nose is, splitting that pressure over the fish and under the fish and beside the fish, and then reforming behind here as almost like a wall of water molecules that it can push off of, and is also being squeezed off of like this to push it forward. I hope you like my nails. It was to get your attention. So the scales reduce resistance and drag on the actual fish's body, and there's also glands along the fish and the lateral line, which can give them sensory input, as well as with the glands, it causes mucus and oil to oil up this entire body, and that allows them to reduce friction of water molecules, and also it can even push away water molecules. It can cause water to channel in certain ways, that it follows along the fish's scales and the ridges of the scales, and literally pushes and squeezes as that scale goes high and the next one's tucked under. That water goes boom, 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 kind of almost like steps, pushing the fish forward. And it's all about how strong that center core is here, which is how fast it can go, it depends on how rigid it can maintain this shape here in profile, rather than if we look at a fish from above where it can go side to side, it would just fling to one side if all the water broke along one side and was pushing off of it. But they are so much muscle that they can push off of it on both sides, and they alternate. And these central fins, their dorsal fin, their tail fin or their caudal fin, adipose fin or second dorsal fin depending on the fish, and the anal fin all help to stabilize them so that they can cut through that water, as well as the shape of them and their head. So just to get a couple directions down really quick also, pitch would be, if we're looking at the profile of a fish, is up and down. And so a fish changes that by tilting its head and also using its paired fins, the front set of paired fins. It can do that with. Now, yaw is side to side. So again, from above, yaw is right or left, and it's the same in a plane. So up and down is pitch, elevation, yaw is side to side, and roll is turning on its own axis. So if this fish were to do a barrel roll and start spiraling, then that would be roll. And these also prevent roll, the non-paired fins. Whereas the paired fins, as we can see, paired fins help with braking, pivoting, like on a point, and with the pitch, the up and down. So the paired fins allow them to tilt up or down and swim up into the water or down into the water. And also you'll see sometimes when they're stalling and they're just using these fins, and they kind of do a little figure eight motion with each fin. Well, that's causing a little turbulence, and they can do that on just one side, and then the fish will rotate around that fin. So the fish would be turning around that fin as the point that doesn't move. And even though the fish isn't really doing anything, that fin holds the place in the water, and it turns the fish around. Now, the unpaired fins, like we said, they prevent the roll from happening, which allows the force of the muscles all from, say, the cloaca, or the hole where waste comes from, where the ovipositor or where sperm comes from in fish, or milt, it can be all the way up here, or it can be, you know, all the way back here. On this fish, the anal fin's here, so it's probably somewhere here that it's going on. So that also determines how strong and fast the fish is going to be, is the distance between that cloaca opening and the tail end, and how much muscle is in between it, and also how tall that muscle is, because the taller the fish is, the more muscle it can pack in. So like a bass, like this body profile, can pack a lot more muscle in a stubby shape than, say, a Danio or a Minnow, which is much longer, and they've got a much longer tail, but they both still tend to have around 50 to 60% of the muscle in their entire body dedicated to forward propulsion and speed. So I just wanted to show you guys that, and now we're going to look at some animation that we'll discuss as we watch through it. Alright, so before we start this animation, I want to thank the animator right here. Here is his YouTube name, Inner Uruguay, and then we're going to go ahead and watch this animation. He's got some words to it too, but I'll probably add some of my own take on it. So here we can see how fish move, different fish. There was an eel, there's a bony fish there, and then we've got you know, bigger fish, catfish type things, and then rays, and this will animate now. So here's first how the simplest or earliest fish moved, like eels, and this is how we thought sperm moved for a long time too. And you can see there, that's where it's pushing off of and then going forward. And sperm actually corkscrew, and we know that now very recently, that they corkscrew by just controlling their roll. The roll is where all the force comes from, and when you are just a head trying to get somewhere and don't have no other resources to worry about, that is a very efficient way to do it. However, fish have other things they have to do. They have to live a full life. They're not just like little sperm that have a goal of getting to an egg, and that's about it. So, as we see, fast-swimming fish and other fish move differently. They put all that last force into the tail flick of things. And then rays and skates and things move even differently. So we can see that they move like that, like we just saw. But now we're starting to do all sorts of robotics and also understanding hydro and aerodynamics from them. So that's just a really basic, like, so now you get the picture of how the different types of locomotion in fish works. But the next one we're going to do is going to be a little more in depth, and that is going to be, this is all about salmonoids, but this is going to be essentially the same for all bony fish. And this is talking about burst swimming, or how they swim when they are going upriver or in hard currents versus steady swimming, and the forces subjected to them and the motion subjected to them. And I'll also show you the source of this, and it'll be in the description. But this I thought was really interesting, because in the papers that I've read recently, which I can also link for members in the community tab, it's very interesting that the baby fish are all tail when they're first born. Almost all fry are like that. And it turns out that they peak at the stage in which their yolk sac disappears. There's about a week of life, and that is when they peak in their ability to just be a little tail muscle. They're up to 95% tail muscle by weight in some cases, in some species. And for instance, pregnant female guppies will actually substitute the ability to stay buoyant in their swim bladder and reduce the density of themselves because they fill up with baby fish, and they will reduce their ability to fast start in order to have more babies. And that's a huge trade-off evolutionarily. Now here we can really see what I think is most fascinating, which is the forces. Now this is surface pressure on a steady swimming fish. You can see it's kind of nice and easy, and then a flick of the tail kind of gets it going. And that's why it needs to be aerodynamic, because it coasts after that. But when it's swimming upstream, check out the force right there. Boom, that's going through in that flick. And it's important that the fish have a rigid spine and middle line in their body in order to maintain that. Now, this is all that turbulence I was talking about, as well as the wall it kind of produces to push itself off of in the water, just like a plane would do to try to get lift, you know, where it does the same thing behind its tail and underneath its wings. It's all about high pressure versus low pressure. It's just turned on a different axis, basically. Well, it actually affects both axes more so underwater. So, this is right here, the National Science Foundation put that together. So I just wanted to show you that. And the last thing I wanted to kind of show you, because I feel like this helps a little bit too to look at this illustration, is as the fish tightens up, as the fish tightens, let me mute this, sorry about that, guys. As the fish tightens up these muscles, the myotomes, they tighten like little rubber bands in between these little sections, and they pull together here, and that curls those little fry like we saw. And then when they let go, this is going to push this way, but it's up to their spine, their swim bladder, and all that, the glands that cause them to be hydrodynamic, and also the fins that keep them stable, to keep this whole front part going the direction they want. And when they're little, they don't have all this stability yet. They're just a head basically here, and then that much tail. And so they literally just flick and end up somewhere. But it turns out that in guppies, they've found that the length of the tail in the age of the fry has a standard deviation effect on, one, the velocity in which they can spring forward and escape. So for every 1 inch, so if it's got 1 inch of muscle, it's going to go 10 feet. If it's got 2 inches of muscle, it's going to go 100 feet. So it's that much of a ratio increase with that. So I just found that really fascinating, and let's take a look to end this at the little fish again and just kind of watch them swim one more time. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you kind of learned something, and that you'll watch how your fish move and maybe think about the fact of why fry are shaped like they are, and why pregnant fish or fish holding eggs move the way they do, or hide or hang out at the bottom when they can't move. It's a trade-off. Or why salmon change their shape when they're spawning and moving upstream through faster water. It's all just really fascinating. So thanks for watching. Let's end it by looking at the same fish we started it with. And if you're still with me, I'll give you some info about the links and description below. But thanks for joining me, guys. Alright, so here we are again to end the show. We're looking for babies. We're looking for babies, and we'll stress them out a little bit. We'll let them see that we're here. And these, again, are least killifish, native to Florida. When they're relaxed, they just kind of poke forward usually. They can jet forward with the S-shaped motion. As they kink that tail, you can see they get their muscles ready. They get them loaded like a spring. And they spring forward when they're not resting at ease. Now these ones are older, and they are less ratio of head mass to tail, but you can see it's still jetted off. Maybe someone will want to slow this down and look at it. But look at here. We have an adult that's very cautious of us, and when you can tell, they're ready to dart when that tail is curled. That's the telltale sign in all bony fish. So thanks for joining me. I hope you like the content. This is a little more on the science or physics of fish, and anatomy and biology, I suppose. but I just find it interesting. See how they can also use it to pivot on that, on their pectoral fins. They can use those to go in reverse too. So we're seeing those directions that we looked at previously right now. And let's see that it just flicks to the side. So thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, if you like dives into history and just different info about fish and our hobby, plants, and all sorts of other things, then I suggest you click the subscribe button and the little bell alert. And if you want to support this kind of content, allow me to keep doing the research and background footwork that goes into this and trying to find interesting topics, you can support me down below at the links: PayPal, Patreon, membership of the channel. And with that comes the ability to also get access to all sorts of links and updates of any research that I'm doing as well. You know, I think we may talk about shrimp locomotion next, and in that respect, they move completely differently, but they also kind of take off spring-loaded. So just something to think about as you look at different fish in your tanks. And you can see all the water spots on my tanks here. But here's a long danio, a long slender fish. These have the modified fins of domestic breeding, and they can't move the same way. But as we watch the fish, and now that you know what causes them to move which way, you can see that head tilting up and down. And then you can also see that S-shaped swim, even from the side, even not from looking down on them. You can see that. And when we startle them, that jet forward with that slow stream motion versus that intertidal motion, which was that more spring-loaded, using that full, the full musculature in this part of the fish to really push off the water. And it requires also that they have a spine and opposite musculature that's ready to spring back and flex into position right also. Otherwise, none of it works. It all needs the help of one another. And as a last little demonstration, just for fun, we've got here a little credit card. I'm gonna flex it to one side and throw it into the tank. But that was basically how baby fish, how fry. It's not a credit card, it's just an expired health card. But that's how that works. So thanks for joining me, guys. I hope you had a good time, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.